All right. Hello, and welcome once again to Morbid Movies, where we watch movies that appeal to the strange and unusual. I am your host, Mary, the maven of movie trivia, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Dom, who may or may not be a werewolf of London. Say hi, Dom.
Hello. You know I'm not a werewolf of London. You know I live in the
Prove
north
it.
of it. That was actually a great introduction, except for the fact that you've disrespected. Like, you don't call me anything from London. I hate London. I hate it.
Yeah, I know you're a werewolf from the north.
I am a werewolf from the north of England, where you've been. You know where I'm from. Nowhere near London. Anyway, great introduction. And Jim, what do we say about Jim? The third musketeer, the third member, the fine cheekbones, the now short hair. The reason why we got more than 100 views on our last video. Jim.
Hey.
You've scared him.
that was my Jim intro. Mary, what are we doing today?
Today we are doing the brand new Frankenstein movie directed by Guillermo del Toro. Came out on Netflix after a limited theatrical release. So how's everybody feeling about it?
Yeah, this is the best intro we've done. This is the newest film we've ever done on this podcast, Mary. Can I ask you, we talked about it a little bit last time, but why, again, traditionally when you pick films, you pick older films. Some of them I hate. This one I liked a lot, but why have we suddenly jumped? This is 2025. This is brand new. Why are we doing that all of a sudden?
Well, I mean, a lot of it's selfish. I'm just a big Guillermo del Toro fan, and I think that this really fits the niche of our podcast and what we do very well. Anyway, and also there's been a lot of hype and a lot of talk about this movie in the lead up, and even still, like, my feed is just filled with articles. Everybody's talking about Frankenstein, so we should talk about Frankenstein too.
100%. Well, we'll get into it. But first, Jim, welcome back. Your second episode on Morbid Movies. How are you feeling? Why did you cut your glorious hair? And how are your cheekbones?
I'm doing well. I cut my hair because I hate it long and it's just a hassle to deal with. And my cheekbones are doing well.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But it's great to have you both here. What we'll do is we'll run through as normal. We'll do our favourite scene and all that at the end. But Mary, as always, you've done some cracking research for this film. There was a great quote that I wanted to sort of start off with, because there's a real debate, in modern times around AI. Now, Guillermo del Toro commented basically that he didn't want to use simulation, didn't want any AI, which they could have done, given the grandiose nature of this set, old-fashioned craftsmanship. That's what he wanted: painting, building, hammering and plastering. Now, my question is, I think this comes across really well. You could see the effort, you could see the beauty. We've got some more stuff to talk about the set in a second. As people that have worked in art, as people that have worked in film and production in different parts of your lives, in various forms, again, across the great spectrum of art, it's all very well and good being Guillermo del Toro and having a Netflix budget and saying that. But do you think it pays off? Because there's a lot of people using AI at the moment in film, in television, in games, etc., etc. So that quote, in principle, is lovely, but in practice, not easy for the average filmmaker to do. So how do you feel about the Guillermo del Toro approach of, real plasterers and obviously these beautiful sets that were actually crafted and actually, very well done?
Sure. So I love the actual set building, not even just from a this is giving artists work perspective, because of course, when you're talking about CGI, there are people who are artists who do that work as well, and I have respect for that. I don't have much respect for AI, which has probably come through when we've discussed it before. But just in general, I'm a big fan of practical effects. I'm a big fan of physical sets. I think that it just blends better, because CGI always is better than it used to be, like in the Spawn era. But CGI always looks like CGI. You can tell, and AI always kind of has that uncanny kind of wet look to it. So it's having a physical set that the actors can actually exist on, immerse themselves with, and interact with. I think it's better for the performers, and I think it is better for the audience when budgets allow it.
No, I mean, I agree totally. I mean, there's that famous story of Ian McKellen breaking down and crying on the set of The Hobbit because he's just acting on a green screen. Um, and I think that anytime an actor can, they can just kind of react to an actual physical object, whether that just be walls or that actually be a creature or another actor, then it always helps the performance.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting point. Again, I work with a lot of filmmakers again from across the great spectrum, and I understand the use of AI from a budgetary point of view. Obviously, different filmmakers have used it more recently to save cost. Obviously, we're talking big budget Netflix Frankenstein here. But do you guys, while we're here, we might as well talk about it. Is the use of AI acceptable in any form?
I mean, I think it's a tool, and I think that any tool that improves the quality and craft of any art is a good thing. But at the same time, if it's eliminating jobs, then that's detrimental. And I think that if you could have people doing that instead of having them replaced with AI, then that's a negative. That being said, I do think that it could help with bring film kind of down in costs, which would make it more egalitarian. Film is the most expensive art form, at least that I can think of. And it's very, very difficult for people to actually make the films that they want to make because of budgetary constraints. And if you can bring down those costs, then it kind of allows for more flexibility and a wider range of topics that you could explore
Yeah.
in movies.
Yeah, Mary, do you have a similar point or a differing point to that? Obviously, you come to art and creativity from a slightly different perspective as a sort of, a different form of artist. So where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I definitely can understand the temptation to bring costs down, especially for people who are early in their career. But I think that in some ways does become a snake eating its own tail, because a lot of times, your people who want to break into, different art forms are going to start out offering their services for less to gain that experience and gain that exposure. And if you are cutting that avenue off by not hiring the cheap artist and instead just going with the, cheap or free alternative of using a generative AI solution, you're kind of eliminating the next generation of artists from the picture. So I think that there's a paradox in use of AI, where it is cutting off those opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, we tend to try and keep these videos as short as possible, but I think it's worth going into because it's very topical across music, across paper art, across film, television, games, etc. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that before we continue. Another sort of talking point we discussed before we started recording was the hottest Frankenstein in history, in movie history. Jacob Elordi, very much a performer of the moment, a giant of a human being with equally, but not well, with good cheekbones, but not quite Jim's level. But yes, Jacob Elordi, as you noted in your notes, Mary, spent a lot of time in the makeup chair, put a lot of graft into this. But every time I've seen a film in Hollywood so far, a Hollywood adaptation, the monster has been depicted as such. Best looking Frankenstein by far, if you're going for, wide appeal. Your quotes about Jacob Elordi are interesting, though. Obviously, he cared a lot about the role. Said it was the most comfortable he's ever been on set. Del Toro said he never complained once. Let's start with Mary and go to Jim. Jacob Elordi's casting. On reflection, I do feel like that was done to encapsulate young teens, late teens. Obviously, we're of a certain age now in our lives. And there's a lot of young people watching Netflix, a lot of young people investing in this film. Maybe they went to see it at the cinemas. Of course, you mentioned a limited release. Jacob Elordi does a lot for budgets these days. Do you think that was a factor, or do you think that again that Del Toro employed him because he's a grafter, he's a worker, works very hard for the role? Mary, your thoughts on Elordi's casting here?
I definitely think that when you're talking about Guillermo del Toro films, aesthetic definitely plays a role. And Guillermo is certainly a guy who likes to create a sexy monster. You see that in a lot of his films. I think also just like the physical scale, because Lordy is a very, tall guy, which works well for the role. I believe that Andrew Garfield was originally slated to play the monster, but had a scheduling conflict, so they went with Elordi instead. But I would assume that it is definitely a combination of his look for the aesthetic of the film and also his acting ability in this case.
Yeah, it was an incredible performance, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Jim, as a very, very good looking man on and off screen, what do you feel? How do you feel about Jacob Elordi's casting in this film?
I think his performance was excellent. So saying that his casting, I mean, his casting was appropriate. I think the little pitfall for me was that the makeup effects made him look too attractive. So casting him, yeah, great job. But if they could have maybe made it a little bit asymmetrical or had something off on him or something that took away from, sexy Frankenstein, I think it would have felt a lot more appropriate towards the tone of the movie.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make, and obviously we'll talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls you mentioned, because I have a lot of good things to say about this. My only negative is probably that it was geared too much to what I would call the younger generation, although that's a controversial take, of course, because it has appealed to a lot of people from a range of backgrounds. So we'll go into that in a little while. I'll normally ask you about the star of the show at the end, the sort of favorite performer. There's obviously some interesting facts about each performer in this, but let's do this now, given that we've been putting over Jacob Elordi and his casting. Jim, first, is Jacob Elordi the star here? He's the central point, the very, very tall, attractive center point of this film. Is he the star in your view?
I mean, there are two stars. It's Victor and it's the creature. The creature doesn't even appear until about halfway through the movie, maybe about an hour in a 2.5 hour movie. But Victor, Victor carried the first half, and then the monster has his segment, and then they both come together at the end. So I think it's a dual lead situation.
Yeah, excellent point. Mary, your thoughts on your favorite performer? Because again, as you say, there's lots of different parts to this film.
Oh, I'm all in on Charles Dance, but no, seriously, I think it's hard because Oscar Isaac is present throughout pretty much the entirety of the film, so I kind of feel like that pulls a lot of my intention for that reason. But it's difficult to choose in this because I think that there was a lot of like good casting in this film. I like all of the actors in this film, so it is tricky to play favorites.
Yeah, no, I would say actually on reflection, especially with one of the facts that I'm going to bring in now, that Oscar Isaac is probably my favorite performer. You mentioned in your notes that Del Toro wanted Frankenstein to appear less like a mad scientist, which is a trope that we've seen consistently in Frankenstein's films, obviously because of the context. But he looks more like a rock star here. He's a little bit more manic, a little bit more, over the top, I think, than perhaps we've seen, influenced by David Bowie, Mick Jagger, Prince, and things like that. Would you say that depiction of Frankenstein, which is obviously different to what we've seen before, is that what contributes to your love, Mary, of Oscar Isaac in this film and his portrayal?
I definitely I like his look in this film, and he has like some of the most fantastic hair I've ever seen in a portrayal of Victor Frankenstein. I'm very much a fan of the hair. I think that the look works with the way he's characterized in this film because he is less of a mad scientist and more of a kind of obsessed, driven character. And I feel like there's a parallel there that anyone who works in the arts can kind of understand, like this, like just driving need to achieve your vision.
Mm.
That I feel like plays well into that, making him have more of that rock star boundary pushing kind of look.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, your thoughts on that? Obviously, we're all big Oscar Isaac fans. I even liked him in Moon Knight. Different people didn't take very kindly to his terrible British accent, but I'm a huge fan of Oscar Isaac. Your thoughts on his look and aesthetic in this film?
I mean, I guess I see where Del Toro's coming from. He does look very rock starish. I think the look also helps, given that we're in kind of a stuffy Victorian era, him running around with crazy hair helps that mad scientist appeal a lot too.
Yeah, 100%. I love the hair. Uh, very, very cool look. Fantastic, guys. Well, there's a couple of points I want to make on the aesthetic as well. Probably my favorite fact, the presence of that Medusa in the laboratory is just striking. It's actually one of the things I remember the most from the film a week on from watching it. So a lot of really interesting thematic points from Del Toro. He felt Medusa was fitting as she's a tragic monster cursed by destiny. Of course, there's the similarities there. But I love that aesthetic in the film. And to add to that, there's obviously other aesthetic choices. Del Toro using color as a symbol through the film. We have, Claire Frankenstein all in red before she dies. Victor also wearing the gloves, red gloves too, to symbolize blood on his hands. Now, there's so much in this. Again, I particularly like the creature walking more upright as he goes on, and I'd forgotten about that until you mentioned it. I was like, oh yeah, very, very cool. And Frankenstein, Oscar Isaac stoops more as the film goes on, which I think is a really nice little bit of symbolism, bit of imagery. Jim, let's go with you first. In terms of the imagery and thematic points in this film, we've got a couple there to draw from. But what did you most like in terms of the aesthetic, in terms of the themes in this 2025 Frankenstein and Guillermo del Toro's kind of Easter eggs, as it were? It's probably not the right term, but sort of thematic points. Yeah.
Well, I kind of really appreciated just the idea of him always drinking milk because of the Oedipal themes in there. He loses his mother. He even says early on, when my father was away, my mother was all my own. And then his mother dies. That obsesses him to, create the creature to conquer death. But he's always drinking that milk all throughout the movie. And there's just that, kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's just, it's that little Oedipal thing going on there.
Yeah, very cool point there, and brought into Mary's notes. That was the other thing I was particularly interested in you expanding on, Mary, was the double casting of Mia Goth. Is it Goth? Mia Goth? Mia Goth? It's very northern of me to say Mia Goth, but Mia Goth. But feel free to correct my pronunciation or have a go at me in the comments if I've butchered that. But incredible acting as the mother, and of course. Later on having those sort of dual roles. Would you like to elaborate on that, Mary? Because that was a really interesting choice from Del Toro, and I believe it was prompted by new motherhood as well.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting choice that he did in combination with Mia. I'm not sure if it's goth or goth either. I just always read it as goth, but
it sounds kick-ass.
It sounds cool. So
I don't think any of us could really pull that up. Mary, you'd be all right. Mary Goth, Mary Goth, Jim. James Goth. Actually, that sounds ace. Dom Goth doesn't sound great. Dominic Goth. No, I don't like it. So Mia Goth, congratulations on an incredible performance and an incredible name. I digress. Carry on, Mary.
I thought that was interesting having her do both parts, because it does play back into his whole obsession with his mother, because when he encounters Elizabeth, it looks like his mother, and before he even really hears her speak, learns what her personality is like, you can tell he's already like just smitten with his brother's fiancée, because it looks like the mother he lost. And that's one of the things that also ties back into those colors as well, because it's his mother wore red at the beginning of the film, and then throughout the rest of the film he's pretty much the only one who wears red. Like, that color red is always with him, which is something that Guillermo del Toro definitely did intentionally. It's that home and mother thing that he has been chasing his whole life since losing her, that just kind of continues to pursue him throughout the film. So I think that it's a neat choice. And what's funny about it is, even though it's the same actress playing both roles, I didn't recognize it immediately as being the same actress, because I feel like her face was obscured a lot in the beginning of the film, as she had that long veil on. So it took me a little bit to even connect that, but I definitely think that adds another interesting dimension to Victor's character and what obsesses and motivates him throughout the film.
Yeah, I actually didn't notice it originally either, and it took me a little while to notice. So again, props to Mia for that performance. Incredible work, and it deserves, in my view, even though we've obviously picked some holes in it, deserves all the articles and things that you mentioned. There's still a buzz about it weeks and weeks on. One of the most interesting points you brought, Mary, was that Del Toro considers the major theme of Frankenstein to be failed parenthood rather than the mishandling of science. The quote, I believe, is, "For me, it's not a cautionary. It's not a cautionary tale. It's about the human spirit. It's about forgiveness, understanding, and the importance of listening to each other. It's a European tale told from a Latin American view." There's some really interesting, connotations there. Of course, we see it in Frankenstein's relationship with his father. We see it, of course, with the monster and Victor Frankenstein. Failed parenting is an interesting point. Would you like to expand on that, Mary, first, and then Jim, give your viewpoints on that? Because, of course, most people go, "It's a film about a guy playing God. It's a film about it's a film about a monster, and a monster, you don't have to be the monster. You can change your perceptions." These are common things that people associate with these films and do come into it. We'll talk about favorite scenes in a second, as mine sort of plays into one of those tropes. But the failed parenthood thing is particularly interesting and comes up a lot here. Mary, your thoughts, and then we'll go to Jim.
Yeah, and the themes of failed parenthood, I don't think are as present in the source material as they are in this adaptation, because there is some retrofitting of the story to fit this. Like in the book, Victor has there's allusions to some early childhood tragedy, but for the most part, he has a happy life with a loving family in the book. Whereas in this, he loses his mother at a fairly young age. His father, the very stern, sort of abusive, domineering character played by Charles Dance. And then you see that, come forward to when he creates the creature who, is his son for all intents and purposes. He starts to fall back into those same patterns as his father, where he's striking the creature when it's not learning lessons as quickly as he would like, and he becomes frustrated and resentful in a similar way to the relationship he had with his own father. So it definitely is a big theme in the film, just that cycle of dysfunction that can exist, and the way that parents can fail their children in a similar manner to how they were failed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, much deeper themes to explore, and probably things that people will be picking up years from now. Jim, your thoughts on this, please.
The idea of failed parenthood being a common theme or a strong theme in Frankenstein, it's in the book, but it's not. It's more the creature was abandoned. He wasn't abused, and then society really didn't accept him because he looked hideous. So it's more of a parent abandoning their child than it is of cycles of abuse, which is what Del Toro put into the movie. Personally, I enjoyed that, Del Toro adding that. I thought it was really impactful for me. And the ending, which I don't want to spoil, but I did kind of appreciate that. Um, you know, but in the original novel, it really was more abandonment and then society not accepting an ugly, misformed creature.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I think there's lots of things at play here, and one of the things that I loved about the film, we'll talk about favorite scenes again. Trying not to spoil too much, but in the end, we do have this. The monster. He decides not to carry on the cycle of abuse that he's faced. He does forgive, his maker, and he does save. This is very spoilerific, but I think it's important to talk about. He does save the crew that were very violent towards him, and I think that appeals to a lot of people. It appeals to people that have been disenfranchised. It appeals to people that maybe feel different or othered. Certainly, growing up, feeling that way myself, I liked the fact that you had this guy that had been abused or had been looked down upon. This character, the monster in this case, and he was still able to send the crew on their way home, and he was able to forgive his maker. I thought that was pretty cool. It's very hopeful. It's a very hopeful ending. One of the things we talked about off camera was that's not being what we traditionally seen in film adaptations of this. Also, it was certainly not the source material. In terms of your favorite scenes and in what you loved most about this aesthetically, again, for me, the visual, it's very simple. And if we had more time, I would go deeper into it. But the visual of him, pushing that boat off the ice, and even though they had formally attacked him, this crew of people, I thought that was particularly cool. Because again, we could have seen him slaughter everybody. So I like that. That call me a bit soppy, but that is my favorite scene of the film. I thought it was again a very hopeful ending, rightly or wrongly. Jim, what is your favorite scene from the film and why, please?
So I really loved when Victor assembled the creature, in part because that's a really big moment in the film. The whole first half of the film and of the story in general is building up to that. Uh, but Del Toro's way of shooting it, it was very playful and whimsical when what he was doing was incredibly macabre. Visually, Victor's pulling apart different body parts, sewing them together. There's a scene where or there's a shot where he's playing with the tendons in the hand and causing the fingers to move. But the music underneath, it's very whimsical. It's very light, and just that juxtaposition of him doing something horrific, but his mind space just being something of a just discovery and pushing forward and trying to figure out something new is just amazing.
Yeah, I really like you mentioned it. I like the when he's in the sort of room full of scientists trying to sort of prove his worth, and he has that bust, and it captures the ball. That I thought was really cool. Apparently Del Toro has kept that as well as a keepsake from the film, which I think is pretty cool. So he's got this kind of like half human torso in his I like the idea he's got it in his living room somewhere. But yeah, very good points. Again, that juxtaposition is such an important part of this film, so well pointed out, Jim. Mary, to summarize then, your favorite scene, and anything else you want to add that we might have missed from your notes or otherwise, as we sort of wind down, wrap up, etc.
I agree with Jim. I think that that scene where he's assembling the creature with the very like upbeat waltz music playing, like I really also enjoyed the juxtaposition of like the just sort of like playful joyfulness of him doing something that's pretty gross when you actually watch it. I think in terms of anything else I would want to mention, I want to shout out the costume design on this film a little bit more as well, because there was a lot of attention paid to the details in the different outfits that Mia Goth wore in this film. A lot of because she's into botany and insects as her character's interest. The dresses had a lot of insect themes, like very like the necklace with the scarab beetles when you first see her, the green dress that is colored to look like butterfly wings. I just really enjoyed that attention to detail and making her kind of ethereal and have some insect-like characteristics to the outfits as well.
Yeah, again, aesthetic is such an important part of this, and most, if not all, of Del Toro's work. So, incredibly visionary director and great work by the performers. What are we doing next? Yeah, because it's nearly Christmas time. Halloween ends, and the day after that, Christmas begins. No matter where you are in the world, shops fill up with mince pies. At least where I am. And Christmas decorations go up. Unless you're like me and you have Halloween all year round in your house, which I do. Hopefully some of the people that watch this podcast feel the same way I do and have lots of Halloween houses. If you do, send me some photos. Again, I've digressed again, haven't I? Mary, what are we doing next? And
well, yeah. I did send out the email and say, do we have any thoughts about Christmas movies? And you wrote back and said Freddy versus Jason because you're insane. So I think it's like I've been debating if I was going to be nice and let you pick or just make us do Gremlins. Last chance to change your mind, but otherwise we will be having a festive Freddy versus Jason Christmas.
Let's be contrary. Everybody does Gremlins, right? Freddy versus Jason is an interesting one because it's so bad. I actually quite liked it back in the day. It's got the metal soundtrack. It's got two horror icons duking it out. Jim, Gremlin, you're like the sort of the new third, so you bring a new dimension. You could actually make or break this. I say Freddy versus Jason. Mary says Gremlins. We've never been in a situation like this before. So what do you want to do for Christmas in our Christmas episode? Assuming you want to come back, you can still get out. You can get out anytime you want. Some would say get out while you can, but here you are.
I think Gremlins is somewhat predictable. So On the other hand, I don't know if I really want to watch Freddy versus Jason, but
Do you have a
yeah,
secret third option?
You watch
I,
Spawn, man. Come on. You watch
I,
Spawn. My
yeah, no,
dog, my dog wants Freddy versus Jason. Everybody wants Freddy versus Jason.
no, I really appreciate how you two talked about a bunch of good films, and then as soon as I come on, it's Spawn and Freddy versus Jason.
Well, I mean, you bring a new dimension, and again, an excellent set of cheekbones. So maybe we don't need good films; we just need more cheekbones now. Yeah. So Freddy vs. Jason it is. We're in November. Happy post Halloween, everybody. We have been Morbid Movies with Dom, Mary, and now Jim. Are we doing the outros? Jim was great last time. Do you want to do it, Mary? Do you want to do this Keep It Spooky, or should we get Jim to do it again? Because that was pretty great.
Well, I got to do the contact info too.
All right, okay.
So people know how to talk to us.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you do the contact info, and Jim can do the Keep It Spooky.
Yeah, let's do that. So real quick, if you have a suggestion for a future episode, or you just want to let us know how cool we are, you can email us at morbidmoviespod@gmail.com. We are on Instagram at Morbid Movies Podcast, Twitter at Morbid Movies Pod, TikTok at morbid.movies.pod, or on Blue Sky at Morbid Movies.
Fantastic. Jim, see us out.
Keep it spooky.
Yes. Yeah. Keep it spooky, everybody. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.